This is Retail Voices, the podcast where leaders from the world of retail and outside of retail talk straight about what really works. Insight, innovation, and the human side of the industry all in one place. Hosted by Mark Lack. That's me. Let's dive in. Hi, John, and a big welcome to Retail Voices. Today, we're talking about the strategic side of retail, not just what you sell, but how the right story makes customers care, connect, and buy. John Elbing is the creator of Storybuilding, a methodology and best-selling book that flips traditional storytelling on its head by starting with what the customer needs first. He's a brand strategist, speaker, consultant, and the Chief Storybuilder Officer at Standpoint, where he's helped hundreds of companies clarify their message and deepen audience engagement. Hi, John.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for the great intro. It's always nice to hear.
You're very welcome. Let's begin with how you came to focus on story building. How did your early experience shape your belief that brands, especially retail brands, need a different way of connecting with customers?
So I guess there are two ways of answering that. But I mean, the personal side is I've always sort of, I think I was trying to avoid conflict. So I always tried to imagine what the other person felt. So when I was in contact, when I was saying something, especially something a little difficult or something, I was always trying to, imagine and almost even rehearse what I was going to say. And I felt that somehow that fits into brands. So when I started working with companies, this idea where when you talk about yourself, you talk about the company, I was always in this idea of, well, how do people feel when they hear that? How do we, what does that touch? And, and then over the years, it really came into, my company's name is Standpoint because you have to, take the other person's standpoint. And I got into storytelling because it's all about that, emotion is so important. Whatever you're selling to a person that, so yeah, that's where it comes from.
Reason for starting. I mean, it's probably one of the oldest things that humans do. When we were cavemen and gathering around the campfire, we sort of used to sit and tell stories. And we all still do it now when we go out, whether we're speaking with friends, whether we're speaking in a sales environment, we're sort of building a story. I think as well, a lot of retail brands struggle because the market is so saturated and we get so many inputs from all these different places that we attach to all of the time that consumers tend to tune out generic messaging. So from your perspective, why is storytelling often failing brands and how is story building different?
So I find that storytelling has become a buzzword. Everyone's talking about storytelling. And often when you look, it comes down to how to better tell a story, how to make it cute, how to make it clever, how to, a hook, and if you're in person, how to stand and how to this and how to that. What your website's supposed to look like, or what tone, or do you have a fun little character or whatever it is. But first, you have to know the story. So story building is about really going through the steps of figuring out where your customer, who's your customer and who's not your customer, and who you're talking to. What are they going to compare you to? How are you different from everything else they know? And what will the experience be like? And all this. And so then I've gotten into this methodology where it's all about building a story structure. And then later on, we can see about how you want to instantiate that with a clip, a movie, a thing, a website, a pitch deck, a packaging, whatever it is. But first, you work on that. And so I find that's very different from a lot of people that talk about storytelling.
It is. I mean, having been in a sales environment for a long time now, as you can see, um, we talk a
We're
lot.
in the same club.
We are in the same boat. And we talk a lot to our sales teams, especially in the supermarkets and especially in the customer touch areas, about building stories for the customers. But again, a lot of the time they tend to be from our own perspective as a business. So, what are the benefits of shopping with us? And we tend not to see it from the customer side. And a while ago, probably about 5 or 8 years ago, um, I was looking at the customer behavior in, for example, buying televisions. Um, and we came up with a slightly different way because if you go into a hypermarket and you want to buy a big screen TV, the first thing that the sales guy normally asks is, how much money do you have? um, which is not the best way of choosing a television um, because it might not fit your purposes. Because, as I've said on previous podcasts, if I was going into a store, the first thing I want is an 85-inch television, and I'd take that home and my wife would beat me over the head with a stick, because there's no way that screen is going to fit into the room that we're going to put it into. So that was what started the questioning, and how we changed the questioning for the sales guys was, okay, the first question you ask is not how much money do you have to spend, but which room is that television going into? Because if it's going in the kids' bedroom compared to going into the living room or into a den or into the kitchen, that immediately gives you a perspective of size, maybe. How big is that room that you're putting the television into? So now you're starting to see the purchase from the customer's behavior or the customer's needs, rather than just, I want to spend a lot of money on a television, which doesn't always help them. A second or third question then was asked, which was, what do you normally watch on that television? Because again, this came down to things like screen refresh rates and color and all of that kind of stuff. So if they watched a lot of football, they needed something with a high refresh rate because you've got sports and speed. If you're watching a lot of movies, then you need a deeper black. So it immediately started you drawing in the customer to what the customer actually needed rather than what they wanted.
I think that's great. So I'll try to fit that into what I do, in the sense that, the story building, I base it on is, I feel that you go through 3 steps when you encounter a brand. The first one I call recognition, is you sort of have to recognize yourself in the brand. And so the person that's coming to buy a TV, some will go into a hypermart, some will go into a specialized store, some will, and some are looking for, something that's design and all that. And that first step, if you can get for your store that your ideal customer sort of recognizes themselves in your brand, in your vibe, in your thing, you sort of you start with a good match.
Yes. Yep.
And then, of course, they have to understand, what you're selling. And I call that perception. But then there's a third step that I find that often companies miss, is I call projection. They have to sort of imagine what it's going to be like, because there are so many obstacles out there. And I think your story is great, because what you're doing is they're closing their eyes and they're imagining that TV in the bedroom and what they're going to be watching. They're imagining with their kids, the buddies over for sports. And the fact that they're already pre-living that TV in their home is really powerful.
And that was the aim. It's comfort zones. It's creating a comfort zone for the customer, and also creating or reducing the credibility gap between the customer and the sales guy, because actually the sales guy is not just there to sell you a TV. He's actually there to sell you something that's going to be sitting in your house as a big part of your house for quite some time.
Yeah, and I think that, you're saying, this TV is for, my mom who's 87 or something. It's going to be different, and people come in with worries to say, okay, the big TV looks great, but I know that remote is going to be impossible. You always have you have 6 remotes. You never know which one to click and all that. So if you can go in and say, hey, with this TV, there's a free, sort of, program thing where with one button you can get your thing, that removes some of these obstacles, or, there's this great mounting system where you can put it on your wall, you don't need if you can really get them into already imagining what it'll be. I mean, they're a few steps further into that engagement and, closer to clicking buy or to.
Absolutely. And again, you're removing the barriers to purchase. Because although the customer wants to buy a TV, he wants to be sure he's buying that TV from the right place and it will satisfy his needs. And the more you can actually clarify what the customer is looking for, the less likely they are not to walk away, because that's the other thing that happens.
Plus,
So
the idea of there's this paradox of choice. We always feel that the more choice is better. And then you go in the store and there's 50 different TVs. I mean, it's the same with like ham in the supermarket, I mean, and so often if you go through the process you're describing, you're taking away choices actually. Saying,
yes,
oh, well, you won't want those, you won't want these, you want that thing. So the one we chose, you're reassured in saying you're making the right choice. Because if you go in and sort of pick one, you go out saying, there's no way that I could have picked the best. There must have been a better choice. There are so many choices out there. I must,
yes.
and so your more choice makes you more frustrated and worry and buyer's remorse. And to help them nail it down into something that feels, okay, that's the perfect one for you, and you're comfortable with that choice. That's, an amazing feeling for the buyer.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we talk a lot about this in category management, in terms of assortments and the way that you can bookend categories and subcategories, and then within that down to the brands and the packaging types. You can end up with those bookends and pricing to give the customer some comfort that they're not necessarily choosing the worst. They're not necessarily taking the best, the most expensive, but they're getting something close to what they're looking for. So this sort of starts to not manipulate, but it starts to change consumers' behavior to a certain extent. And it's how do we make sure, how does that shifting perspective early on, and you talk about it right from the customer coming in and feeling part of that brand, how does shifting that perspective early change the way a product is positioned or marketed?
Well, I guess we all know that, you walk in a store and it's this crazy luxury brand where the floor is marble and there's gold everywhere and the thing, and you think the store must have cost millions, and then the t-shirt is $200, and it might be the same t-shirt that's $15 down the street, but somehow it fits in. And pricing is a crazy thing. And on one side there's the discounters and fighting on price and margin, and then the other side, price is a kind of proxy for quality. And
Yes.
so that you think, oh, that must be worth more. I saw a study on Amazon. So you go on and want to buy a kitchen utensil, a spatula or something, and you find the exact same silicone spatula, sold by 50 different people in all different prices. It goes from $4 to $29, and people don't buy the cheapest. The people buy the one where they feel that. So maybe it might be the story, the picture. It's in a kitchen, it's in a thing, and it looks like it's and all these things will make people think, oh, that's one is worth that extra price. Even though at the end of the day it's actually the same. The same actual same
The
product.
same product, exactly. Yes. I mean, I was I remember back, oh gosh, when was it? 2010 or 11 maybe. I was traveling around with a very large retail group, and I happened to be in France, and I was meeting with the commercial director there. And he was talking to me about how he managed his assortment. And specifically, he broke it down to one very specific subcategory, which was coffee machines, which was important in France, obviously, coffee machines. And he said, I only have essentially 5 coffee machines in my assortment. He said, I could have 50 because everybody's trying to get these coffee machines into our stores, but we only have 5. We have one at the bottom end, which is the cheapest one, which effectively nobody buys. Because if an office executive, managing director comes in with his secretary to look at coffee machines, he's not going to buy her the cheapest one. That's never going to happen. But the cheapest one is there to show value. We can give you a coffee machine at this price. He said, so the secretary gets the next one up. He said, then at the top end, we have this machine, which is all bells, singing, dancing, everything, all the whistles. He says, we sell very little of that. Nobody buys it. But what we're doing by having the top end is showing our competency within that subcategory. He said, so the manager or the executive will then buy the next one down for him because he doesn't want to look as though he's being ostentatious. So automatically what you've done is you've upgraded one person and kept the other person exactly where you wanted them. Because that one just below the top end one is the one where you make margin.
Yeah, I mean, it's it can feel manipulative, but you're actually, you're trying to find what matches, the person.
Exactly. Exactly, and that tends to be what happens in a lot of these places, and you see it with a lot of retailers the way they do it. I get a lot of retail brand leaders, CXOs, listening to the podcast, and especially now the Retail Voices ones. What's the first practical exercise or step in story building that can help them rethink their positioning quickly? What should they be looking for?
So one that comes to mind, I mean, I still think this idea that does your ideal customer recognize themselves in your brand? When you walk down the street and you walk in front of stores or cafes or whatever it is, and then you skip some, and then suddenly you think, "Ooh, that's for me." And so, does that match? And because if you're bringing in the wrong people, then that doesn't work. And so if that real match, you have a sort of better quality first encounter because they're already the right person. So you sort of step back and say, so who would stop in front of my store, or who would stop in front of my website? What is the person? And often I find that they're trying to please to everyone. And so then you don't. I mean, you come in and it's sort of bland for everyone, and somehow niching down a little bit and making it there's some kind of statement, some kind of you'll actually attract those people that will be more loyal, will spend more, will really match what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you brought up something earlier about understanding who your customer is and who your customer isn't. And you mentioned it again there, it's are you attracting the right type of people for the store? And if you're trying to attract everybody, unfortunately, that never works because not everybody will shop with you and not everybody will shop everything with you. And I remember quite a few years ago now when we were looking at the way customers spend with us. And we'd started to get the first results from our loyalty data. So we were looking at the loyalty data and saying, okay, what are our high value, high frequency customers? What are they buying? When are they buying it? How are they buying it? And we started breaking down a certain amount of customers. And I think it was something like 4,000 customers became our HF, high value, high frequency customers. And we started to look at what they didn't buy rather than what they did buy to see if there was a gap. And the first area we looked as a hypermarket was obviously the fresh departments, and we chose fruits and vegetables because we believed everybody should be able to buy fruits and vegetables from us, especially if they're a high value, high frequency customer. But there were 50 customers out of those 4,000 who never purchased fruits and vegetables from us. So what we did is we actually called them up to try and find out why they weren't buying. Now, some of them were very obvious as to why they weren't buying because they were offices. They were just buying coffee and tea and sugar and bits and pieces for their office. So they're not going to buy fruit and veg. So within our systems, we could then say to the system, when you market to this person, do not send fruit and veg advertising because they're never going to buy it and it's a waste of our marketing money.
This idea of asking people why they don't buy, I think, is really interesting because often,
Mm.
you get a purchase, and so then you can say, did you like the purchase, and why did you, all this kind of thing. But to catch the people that didn't buy is more difficult. There was this interesting an ad agency did this where they asked people what almost made you not buy. So I mean, so you're talking to people that buy because you have access, and then and they'll come back and say, I had trouble reading the packaging, or it was this or that, and I went on to Yuka and this and or something, but then I bought it anyways. And then you can try to get, well, then there's other people that were just on the other side of that decision and just didn't buy, and maybe you can tweak something and say something differently that will bring everyone, into a more comfortable space for that purchase.
Absolutely. I mean, we did a very similar experiment with availability, because obviously availability is a very strong metric that all retailers measure to see whether they're in stock, on shelf. There's a variety of different measures that we do, but there's very little research that looks at what happens when the customer's product isn't there. It's not very heavily researched. But what we found was that, okay, if somebody was coming to buy, let's say, a 400-gram tin of Heinz baked beans, if that wasn't there, they would then pack size switch first within the same brand. If the pack size wasn't there, so they might go to a 220-gram or they might go to a 600-gram within Heinz. Now, if that wasn't there, they would actually brand switch. So they'd pick up maybe Cross and Blackwell beans and baked beans instead. So then you've got the sort of, okay, you still got a purchase. And then the third option for a customer was that they would buy something other than beans. So a different product entirely to fulfill the same need. Now, when we put all of that together, actually availability, only 10% of customers bought zero for that purchase. So we spend a lot of time on the metric of availability, but customers actually give you a little bit of freedom to play with that availability, because they will pack switch, brand switch, product type switch before they buy zero. But we spend too much time on it. And I think this is where, where we look at things like brand trust and story building. That trust and clarity in retail is huge. Because the products that we sell can either make something look great, if I put on this flashy new shirt, or I might kill them because I've sold them an old bit of beef. So that brand trust is really important. So if a brand is trying to break through with new audiences, how do you refine the story to impact retail metrics like conversion, engagement, or repeat purchase?
So when you go through this, if you can attract more ideal customers, so you somehow you position your story, even your store, your website, your things, so that the right people come in your door. You already sort of you start with a kind of a better quality top of funnel kind of thing. These people have you have a better opportunity of engagement of purchase down the line. And then you bring them through a number of things, and one is differentiation. Why everyone does everything. So how is it different? And if you can stand out on something that's different, people can sort of are comfortable putting you in a category. Sometimes you go in a store and you sort of think, what is this mix of stuff? And you're not quite sure. When I want to go out and buy something, you sort of have this idea of what a store should be. And then this idea that you project them into what it's going to be like. So that, you're buying the shirt. Well, your TV example is great because they're already imagining what it's going to be like. And so it's better people at the beginning, so somehow you have a better, and then you bringing them a few more steps into the engagement, the thing. I mean, it becomes that isn't should I buy? It's, oh damn, what would happen if I didn't buy?
Yes.
the default in the mind becomes they've imagined it and they're already wearing the shirt to, impress their girl. And then they, and the sense of loss is more powerful than the sense of gain. So they're sort of they're already thinking of, oh damn, I'm going to lose that feeling, that experience, that whatever, instead of saying, should I do it? And so you add call at the beginning and you bring them along farther at the end, and so that all translates into conversion, into all those metrics that you talked about.
Yeah, so this is coming back to the kids' vernacular. This would be FOMO, yeah, fear of missing out.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a very strong feeling that people get, and especially more so nowadays, because people just don't like missing out on anything anymore. But at the same time, it's brands exist to sell products. But they also make a lot of mistakes. I know in my own retail businesses, I've made some absolute whoppers in terms of mistakes. What are some of the common mistakes you see in how retailers talk about value, especially, and what's the simplest shift they can make to fix it?
Often I see products where the value is described through features
Hmm.
when I feel that the value is the transformation you offer to your customers. So you're going to
Okay.
have, so the camera is not the number of pixels, it's how good, pictures it takes. How you're going to save your memory. The, the iPhone revolutionized photography because it helps you make amazing pictures. And you don't care about shutter speed and this and that and the other. They're delivering an experience. And
Yes.
so if you can really, concentrate on, what the benefit is to the customer, what the experience will be, what the thing, more than, we have, the whatever metric they have, we have this many megahertz or this or something, and people don't necessarily know that or don't care. It's not about uh, how many calories. It's about, being healthy while you feel good or something. You're
Yep.
shifting into their perspective on it and away from just the product itself.
Yeah, and I think again, it's I would say it's moving away from the transaction itself into the feeling, the way the product makes you feel once you've purchased it.
When you said the meaning or the goal of companies is to sell products, I sort of said, well, isn't it to satisfy customers?
Yes.
Isn't it to, and if you, and the more you satisfy the customers, of course, the more products you'll sell. But if you're solving some problem or creating some benefit or achieving some aspiration, or there's something that you're bringing to your customers, and that's the goal. And then your product or service or whatever is just a means to that.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, it's a means to an end. And I think a lot of retailers don't look at what they're actually doing. They do think, like I just said, we're in business to sell products. Actually, I know a lot of retailers now are looking at experiences instead of just products, which is sort of part way towards story building. Because it's giving a customer something else. I'm not sure yet how I can make an experience out of buying tins of beans. Um,
Well, you go into a supermarket today and the experience is very different from 20 years ago or whatever.
yeah,
It's more artisanal and more looks like, there it's less efficiency, more on this the pleasure, the smells, the furniture and whatever the furnishings are create a style. If you see the difference from, a McDonald's back in the day. So I'm in Switzerland now, but I was born in the States, and um, there was these colorful, crazy family things, and now you go into McDonald's and it looks like a corporate office that's beige and black and very chic, and you think, what happened along the way? Are they still attracting? It seems like they're targeting families, but when you go in, it doesn't look like it anymore, um,
Absolutely.
and you
Absolutely.
wonder what's going on.
And I mean, I have a particular beef with a very large supermarket group based out of the UK, because, 30, 40 years ago, they were very much stack it high, sell it cheap, and they were interesting to go into, because they knew that their customers were looking for value. Over the years, what they've done, they've become very, very sort of rigid in how things are done in each of the stores. And they've almost taken out all of the local store managers' ability to service his or her local customers. And they've just taken efficiency to a degree whereby a manager almost has his day worked out for every 5 minutes of the day, which actually doesn't help him. And then how does he locally create those stories for his or her customers?
There's a
And it's a shame.
supermarket. There's a supermarket chain in Switzerland where I went into one of the smaller ones that was in this very posh neighborhood, and there wasn't the same products. Of course, the basic was the same, but they would come up with a whole series of things that were very different than if you go into the same store across town a more list high status neighborhood. And I thought that was for some you have hundreds or if not thousands of stores, and you can find the way of giving the autonomy to each store
Yes.
to work with their customers. I think is really important.
And it can be done because, I mean, I did an episode for Retail 101 about it called the Japanese art of tapping cannery, which is what 7-Eleven uses. And effectively, it leaves the granular category management down to store managers. So store managers themselves see that their customers like tuna sushi instead of salmon sushi, then the store manager can give more space to tuna sushi and leave the salmon sushi with a little bit. It allows the store manager to really look at the data, to really understand their local customer bases and change things accordingly to that local customer base. Now, obviously, I think they're currently on about 38,000 stores, I think, with 7-Eleven. And, for anybody to change from what they're doing now to that tap and cannery style of management, I think would be a big challenge because, most commercial directors, most operations directors, and most CEOs actually want to have control of all of that because they think consistency is actually what customers want. But it's
But
actually not.
they do, but
Yeah, they
not
do. Yeah.
across stores. They want consistency within their store. The other stores don't
Yeah.
exist. They
Yes.
don't
Yes.
care if the store in a different city is the same. Um,
Oh,
I had a local right where I lived. The supermarket that had been was decades old was really getting a little bit was they moved it into a new space that was brand new. And I always go and talk to the people in these stores. So, it's a supermarket that has, food, but also, stationery and whatever and all this kind of thing. And so I talked to the guy in like the cleaning product aisle, and he was, you could tell that he was frustrated because in the old store he had an extra thing and he could have this product, and now there isn't the space, and he was you could tell how he took his job into he managing what he would deliver to his customers, and he knew what they wanted and all that, and that change you could tell was difficult for him
oh, yeah,
because he had
absolutely. I mean,
constraints.
strangely, just a few days ago, I went into a different Aldi store to the one I normally go into. And I do like Aldi because they know what they are, they know what they're there to do, and they consistently achieve it. So I go in there from time to time just to have a look. And this time I went into a different store in a different town, and I sort of got lost in there because it wasn't laid out the same as the other store that I'm used to going into. Um, but again, because their merchandising, the way they do things is very flexible, it means that stores can have a different flavour. which is nice. You can still see it's an Aldi, but the flavour in this store was slightly different based upon its customers. And I think when you look at that perspective, retail brands nowadays are selling across different channels. So, they sell direct to the consumer, they're doing some wholesale, they're on marketplaces, they're on social, they're on online. And each of those ways of purchasing has a different context for the customer. How does story building help maintain the consistency of the brand that you're trying to project while still resonating across the different channels?
Going back to this idea of the structure of a story, you're identifying clearly who your customer is, what their, aspirations and challenges and whatever it is that, and then, being in a clear category for them. When you go to, so sure, in this second Aldi, you got a little bit lost, but you didn't feel that they had betrayed the brand promise, right? I mean, it
Yes.
was
Yeah.
still, you think, okay, I know who they are, what they are, the thing, fine. And then I recognize, so there's different levels of story. There is that brand story where you say, you go in and you trust them, you know what to expect, and it's clear. And then you have a little bit of freedom. There's the sort of kind of the local brand story, where a particular store does something a little bit differently. And story is a broad term. It's not necessarily, once upon a time. It's this.
Yes.
It's the stories people, if someone asks you, so tell me about what's this Aldi thing you're talking about, and then you'll tell a story. And so that's the story that's important. It's the
Yes.
story that your customers are telling themselves. And so, a number of these kind of values and a positioning and a thing create the story. I've been recently looking into luxury brands, and the stories behind luxury brands, even retail stores, are very different. If you go to a hardware store or to a high-end clothes store, fashion store, it's going to be very different.
Yep.
And it's really about almost the governance of your story over time. You have a new idea, say, hey, we could do this on Instagram. And you say, well, does that fit our story? And, especially in luxury, that consistency, that unwavering position. I mean, what you don't say is almost just as important as what you do say. And you might want to skip up, and you might want to sort of think, oh, right now everyone has to publish on socials 10 times a day. Well, maybe not, because that's not who we are. And
yes, and it's not who your customers are. I mean, again, I remember when we started up our loyalty scheme, and because of the way because it was app based, we had multiple ways of connecting with our customer, and also them connecting with us, which was the important bit, because the app itself was supposed to be for the customer. What we got out of it was obviously all of the data that we could then use. And we started sending out some messages to customers. And the first one I remember was I was actually driving past the store, and we'd been using the location-based technology. And as I drove past the store, my app activated and it sent a message to my watch to say, oh, you're just driving past our store. We have this special offer on electronics on kettles today. And it was great, and it was quite interesting the first time. But because obviously I was driving around all of the different stores, every time I drove past a store, I got another bing. So immediately, within a couple of days, we said, okay, we're only allowed to bing the customer once when they go past a store in a week. We can't be binging them every time they go past every store. We had a lot of stores in the town, in the city. So it's how you manage the expectations, because yes, I was impressed when it first happened, but when it happened 10 times in the same day, that was a bit annoying.
So there are two things for that. So one, I found there was in some South American country, the Burger King did delivery during traffic jams.
Oh,
So they
wow.
had a system where when people were stuck in traffic, within, and location based with the app, and they were this far from a store, the thing and all that. They could order food and have it delivered to their car while they were stuck in the traffic jam. So I thought, this location based thing, that was quite a success. The other thing is I signed up for a marketing conference once, and this was the kind of American, yeah, crazy conference. And I got something like 3 emails a day for 3 weeks reminding me about the thing. And that was so annoying. But then I went to the conference and they started by saying, when people sign up, we split them in two. Half of them we harass them. We send 3 meals a day, and the other half, we send a confirmation, a reminder a week before, a reminder the day before. 90% of the people that are here are the ones we harassed. You're here, so you all hated it, but you're the ones that showed up.
Incredible.
And that was very disturbing. It's kind of like the pop-up things on websites where everyone hates them.
Yeah.
But somehow it works. And so how far do you go? Is the annoying, for a one-time conference, that's fine, especially if they have a story behind it. But for a regular purchase, that can become annoying. And so you have to manage that,
Yes.
between what works and sort of the long-term effect of what you're doing.
Yes. Well, this again is like the Amazon delivery pop-up, isn't it? So, you've literally just had the item delivered and automatically there's a pop-up. How did we do? And it's like, well, I haven't even opened the parcel yet. It was just arrived. I haven't even looked at it. I haven't used it. I haven't touched it. So, why would I give you a review on a product that's literally just landed in my hands, not even opened the box?
I think that's especially relevant for product categories. If there are some things, if I just bought milk, I'm not going to give a review ever.
No.
And if I do, I buy a power drill, you sort of think, okay, well, you need a little bit of time to know. If I buy jewelry as a man, that's for a present, and that's not the next day.
No,
so to ask me for a review right away, you should wait a month.
Yes.
Because then you have to give them time to give it, to get feedback, to see, and then the review could be something like, hey, it's great, she wears it every day, but you can't ask that too early. So depending on your product, you really have to manage that to get, the reviews. And often I get requests for reviews way too early, and I haven't, used the product or given it. I'm the kind of guy that always has a few presents in my drawer and things, so that you have to wait a while before you'll get a review.
Exactly. And, it's the other thing is the fact that it pops up. Now, if I've purchased a present for my wife and it arrives and I want to put it aside, and then all of a sudden the pop-up comes up, you've just had a delivery, how did we do? And my wife's thinking, you've had a delivery of what? What did you get delivered? Because they want to know, because they might think, okay, you've had something delivered. You think, well, I cannot tell you just now. Wait a week.
Exactly.
So that's sometimes a bit crazy. The other challenge, I suppose, is once we start looking at this story building and providing experiences, is getting the internal alignment. And this was always the problem that I found across different businesses that I've managed, especially because you might have 10 stores, you might have 200 stores, you might have 500 stores across 3 or 4 different countries within a given region. Is how do you get the message all the way down to the people that will be using that, and then make sure it's not diluted, because it's a little bit like we build a strategy document every 2 or 3 years and we present it to the board, and the board go, yeah, okay, that's fine. And then we go back to our offices as a CXO team and we think, okay, let's put that in the drawer now. But I've always tried to make sure that strategy document is actually disseminated down to teams as quickly as possible. So from a story building perspective, how does your methodology help make internal coherence part of the external experience?
So first, I've worked also with, smaller companies where just the fact that you build the story together
Mm.
is I had this group of 10 people, and I said, okay, write down what your company does, and I got 10 different stories. And then they built a story together, and they sort of came out saying, okay, I mean that it gives focus, it gives your it's something. And yeah, and I agree that the vision and statements and mission statements, and there's all these buzzwords, and you could actually replace your brand with your competitor's brand, and it would be the same. Um, uh, and one way of doing it that I found interesting is, instead of having a mission statement, it's a habit statement.
Okay.
What
Okay.
what should what should every employee kind of what are the three things they should do every day that matches what we want or trying to achieve and our values and satisfies our customers, and it can be about how you interact with customers, or what you look up, or what you share, what you all these things, where it becomes, if I go into a business and say, what's your mission statement, if people don't know, well, then it doesn't exist.
Yes.
It has
Yeah,
to
of
be
course.
something, practical and concrete that they can, and there are these few examples out there, the history of Southwest Airlines back in the day, where they gave autonomy to the people at the counter to help their customer. And
Mm.
stories like, you can't take your dog on the plane. Well, I'll keep your dog for the weekend, and you'll pick it up when you get back. Kind of level of autonomy to the people, and that is a really strong story, because they live it every day.
Yes.
So when it's abstract and sort of this lofty thing, well, that's not going to change behavior.
No, it's
Uh,
not. No. I mean, I worked for Circle K for a while across the GCC. And initially, when we started looking at strategy, vision, mission, and changing the way we talked about things, I wanted to make sure that the message wasn't diluted as it went through the other CXOs, the directors, the managers, the district managers, right down to the team on the floor. Um, so what I did is I created a weekly Kcast, a podcast, that specifically talked about certain elements of either strategy, service, standards, stories that we wanted to sell. And in particular, when we were looking at category management, we looked at the four different things that we were trying to do for our customers, or that our customers expected from us. And that was food to go, food for now, food for later, and then distress emergency purchases. So there are sort of four elements, but we had to explain that to all of the employees. And so the Kcast was one way to do it, because that went to everybody's inbox, and everybody on the WhatsApp group had access to that particular Kcast, so that everybody knew what we were trying to be for customers, or what customers expected from us in terms of what they were buying from us.
so you have to get something that's in a format that people actually then watch, of course.
Yes. Yep.
um, highlighting actual people in the business, having it, the voice of your employee. You can sort
Yep.
of, have a thing where you can propose another employee to be highlighted. The one company, I mean, it wasn't retail, but they had a system where any employee could give a bonus to another employee. Say, oh,
Oh, wow.
them,
Okay.
here's $50 or whatever it was. It was small enough that it wouldn't hurt the bottom line, but big enough that it sort of makes a thing. And you can stop down and say, how you handled that was really cool. But ding ding bonus kind of thing. It's kind of like the bell in the bar when
Yes.
someone gets a tip. They sort
Yep.
of, because everyone can recognize that, and so they're reinforcing these values themselves,
Yes.
instead of top down kind of thing.
Oh yes, absolutely, and that's always good. When I mean, the one thing that I do talk to my guests quite a lot about is the future, because obviously the future's coming. We can't stop it. It will keep going. Um, what what shifts do you see in how customers want to be communicated with? especially in retail environments. I mean, we mentioned it earlier, retail environments are now changing. We're becoming a little bit more comfortable and places to hang around rather than just go buy your tin of beans and leave again. So what do you see in the future? So if I'm not expecting you to read the tea leaves, but what your
The
direction
bean
do you
age.
see us going in?
Yeah. So I guess, retail is really broad, of course, and the what's happening in the hard discounters is very different from what's happening elsewhere. But I think there is a shift towards towards experience,
Hmm.
as we say. I mean, it's online and offline, and then uh, the purpose. You have to When I say you have to recognize yourself in the brand, there is a kind of way of saying this is part, your identity, your values, your aspirations, your challenges and things. And so, especially I guess the younger generations, how do they position themselves? What are their values, inclusion and all of those other aspects, sustainability, and you sort of have to live those. There's a lot of greenwashing and things, you go, but so how do you, it, it, I wonder how much it links to employer brand, in the sense, the people you're hiring, reflects the people you're serving, and how that fits something that's not just purely transactional.
Yeah, and I think that's again another shift that I have seen over the years is that the people that you are now recruiting are very different to the people that you used to recruit. Um, I mean, we started this practice a few years ago in that we recruited for attitude rather than even for experience or skills or whatever they've got on a piece of paper that they say they've got. It's how people come across in the interview itself. And how that experience leaves you as a recruiter, because that will then translate into the brand that you want to project in front of customers. So I've rejected a lot of very highly experienced people, partly because they just didn't come across very well. If and I've said to quite a few people when I've been interviewed myself on different programs and channels that if somebody in an interview for a customer service connected or adjacent position can't smile in that interview, they're not going to get hired by me. um, because I keep saying I can't teach people to smile. But I can teach you how to give good customer service, how to fill in a form, how to use a computer. I can teach all of that. But I can't teach the right attitude if somebody doesn't have the right attitude in the first place.
I don't know if you've seen the TV show The Bear. It's about this
No.
restaurant in Chicago. And
Okay.
it's a sort of a low-level restaurant that they want to turn into a star restaurant. And they're hiring these head of staff, waiters, and things. And there's this one interview moment where the two interviews after the interview, one says, "Oh well, I mean, she's amazing. Look at her experience. Look where she worked and everything." Says, "Oh no, we're not going to hire her." I put the fork in diagonal on the napkin. And during the whole interview, she never put it straight again. So she's not attentive to, the environment and things need to be at that level. And I thought that was very, very that. It's you're
That's very
catching.
telling. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very telling. That is a thing that was important to that interviewer, um, in terms of what they were looking at. Again, having worked across the Middle East, I was staying at a hotel recently, a very nice hotel in England. So I'll be very clear, but I won't name the hotel because we had a chat with them anyway. Um, and several times, whilst we were in a very high end Michelin starred restaurant, the waiters who were delivering the food, which was a tasting menu, actually leaned over the table and leaned over people who were eating rather than servicing properly. So that was an interesting discussion, because they obviously hadn't been trained. Now, I wouldn't expect that level in McDonald's. I wouldn't expect service at the table in McDonald's, but in a very, very high-end restaurant, I would have expected that, which didn't happen. So again, I think sometimes expectations don't match. Recently, I was in Dubai, again at a very high-end place, and they very clearly say on their blurb on their website, smart casual. No tailored shorts is okay, but no open top sandals, no this, that, and the other. And we went there. We were there at 8, 9 o'clock, and we got our table, which was very nice. And then at the very next table, there were people sitting there as though they'd just come off the beach in string tops, Uh, and it didn't match the experience that the restaurant was trying to project from its website.
Expectations are really important.
Absolutely.
You have to match your expectations more than anything else. You can
Yes.
set them at whatever level you want, but if it's really low and you don't match it, it doesn't work. If it's really high, that disappointment is really
Yes.
important.
Yeah,
There was
the
this.
food was amazing. The food at both places was absolutely amazing. The beverages that went with them were absolutely amazing. But it was just let down by just those disconnects from what they said they were to what they proved they were.
There's this great book called Unreasonable Hospitality. It's about this restaurant, New York, where they wanted to be the best in the world, and they go to extremes of. So when you make a reservation, then you come in. They'll have Googled you, found pictures, and when you walk in the door, they say, "Hey, Mr. Lack, it's so nice to see you." Instead of saying, "Do you have a reservation?" and looking and trying to look up on a piece of paper, kind of thing, and all these details to smooth out all the thing, and that's really interesting. They even had this. There was a plumber in the United States where instead of saying, "We're a great plumber," they said, "We're on time." Because one of the biggest problems with that kind of service is the fact that they come late or don't show up, and you have to sort of take the full day off to be able to do it. And so that creates that expectation and then if you meet that
statement,
you've found the thing that's important to your customer. Of course, you're gonna have to be a plumber, but
yeah, I mean that's a huge statement. I've spent many a time waiting for electricians, plumbers, roofers, all of those services to turn up, and they turn up an hour later, and then they work for about an hour or 2 hours, and then they disappear. So I've just got to pick something up, and of course they're away to do another job for an hour or 2 hours before they come back again the next day, which is not very good. And I've often thought about, how I could. I mean, I'm not a plumber, I'm not an electrician, I'm not any good with DIY at all. The one thing I know I could do if I was doing it was turn up on time. One of the traditions we have at Retail 101 Online, and now in Retail Voices, is that I try and break things down to 3 simple things. Because it just makes it easier for everybody to understand it. So if I look at retail overall, it's product with a product on a clean shelf with a price ticket. That's the very, very basics of retail. So if we look at 3 simple things to do with story building, what would you want the listeners to take away from today's session?
So I guess I'll come back to these 3 steps in the sense of, stop talking about you somehow. You talk about your customer. And so this means that the right type of customer recognizes themselves, feel comfortable. You push away the wrong people, attract the right people. Does your website or your store have the vibe? And some very specific stores do that very well, and others you sort of feel that that it's not quite clear.
Mm.
Then there's part where I think don't go for clever. Clarity is better than clever. Sometimes you find these taglines or your things, and then, you just don't get it. And then the third is that to help your customer imagine what it'll be like. More, so sure, there's the canned beans thing, but maybe there's, you can take up the recipe cards or the thing, and you have them. If you can get them, imagining the TV in the bedroom, with their wife watching a TV show before falling asleep, that brings them that one step further. Often the story is about the product, but it should be about the customer and about their experience with it, more than the product just itself.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. I mean, that really does tie into sort of everything that really builds story building, and it's something that I know I've tried to sort of generate over the last sort of maybe 20 years without being able to articulate it myself. So I'm really glad that we've had this opportunity to chat to you today, because it certainly crystallizes a lot of my own thinking, and certainly gives other retailers, in fact, any business that is really in the as part of transactions that people do. And it doesn't matter whether you're selling, a liner or whether you're selling a can of beans. These stories are very important. So thank you very much, John. That was excellent. Everyone, that was John Elbing explaining how retailers can stop talking at customers and start building stories that they care about. Let's now say goodbye to John. Goodbye, John.
Goodbye, Mark. Thank you.
And of course, goodbye from me. We'll be back soon with another Retail Voices episode. Check out retail101online.com for more details on upcoming guests. We've got quite a few now that are building up, so make sure you have a look on there. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell wherever you get your podcast fix. Welcome to the Retail Education Revolution. Brilliant. Thanks, John.